This episode is brought to you by Sir Charles Hard Cider, which is proudly brewed in Philadelphia by Original 13 Cider Works. Visit their tasting room on American Street to enjoy their cider, as well as locally sourced food from their kitchen. Look for Sir Charles Hard Cider in local establishments and visit sircharlescider.com for more information.
Hello, and we are back. I am Sierra, and this is the Get Your Life Project. We are here today to talk about the taboo topic. We're playing a game, you guys. It's called the Mental Health Breakdown. It's time to talk about mental health with Sierra. I'm going to have you guys spill your guts, talk about how you cope. Y'all ready to rock and roll?
Not the guts.
It's on you, baby girl.
I'm ready to rock. I don't know. Is anybody ready to roll?
No, I might not be rolling today.
I'm rocking.
You might need to roll, baby.
I got you.
Thank you.
I'm the I have a lot of mental stuff to discuss.
Hey.
I'm Tiffany. I too have the mental stuff.
I'm sorry. I'm Ashley.
Ashley is always cracking up, Ashley.
That's because I have a lot of mental stuff to talk about.
Yeah. Gonna get juicy. All right. So for the purpose of this episode, we're going to go ahead and define mental health. All right. Just in case you didn't know what your mental health was, you're going to learn today. All right.
Thanks, Mama.
So mental health, according to the Googles, mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. So, with that definition in mind, let's get busy. How do you cope with your mental health day to day, Vimba?
I don't cope with my mental. Let's see. I don't know. I feel like I'm avoidant. It's with a purpose, though. I like to process things when they happen. I'm not really like an exploder in the moment. I'm one of those people in a crisis situation. I will internally panic without necessarily externally exploding most of the time. I do this thing called shelling. Like I might wake up and just need a day to myself. I feel like that's my brain forcing me to take care of my mental health. I do yoga. I do yoga as often as I can. Sometimes just for 5 minutes. Like I might just be in child's pose or something just to chill. Journaling, talking to people I care about.
Okay.
Yep.
Tiffany?
I repeat myself a lot and lament all the time. She didn't ask if the way I cope is healthy. She just asked, how do I cope? That's usually the way I do it. As much as I want to be someone who's I just lay in shavasana, or journal. It's just I don't have the diligence, for certain kinds of self-care, but I want to. But I've kind of hit a point where I've just come to terms with the fact I'm not going to wake up every morning and do morning pages and write down my thoughts, because my thoughts scare me sometimes. I don't want to look at them on a page. But I will call everyone I know and which means everyone on this podcast, and talk about my feelings and my thoughts. I feel like the way that I cope needs to transform. I think I need to learn to be a little more introspective, and learn how to kind of sort out anxiety and problems without necessarily having to involve other people. Although it's good to feel like I have a support system. I also, I think, want to be able to be more self-sufficient in dealing with things that disturb my peace of mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think on that note, I would follow I feel like I do a lot of self-sufficient things. I meditate and I do yoga and I journal a lot. That's actually been more of a lifesaver recently, because there's a lot to get out. Mm-hmm. But I still kind of have a tendency to isolate. So that's something that I would be I'm not being closed off because I got my journal and I meditate. But in some instances it cuts me off from really reaching out to people, which I'm starting to learn to do more and more a little bit, every day. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
I found that my mental health, kind of coping with it, has transitioned and changed over the years. So like when I was younger, I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of, kind of introspective, just like thinking about it, kind of ignoring it. And at a very young age, I kind of went through a lot of traumatic things. So it was kind of hard to get that out to anybody. So I felt like the only kind of like recluse that I kind of had was myself. So it also kind of transitioned to me talking to myself a lot. So I would like sit in my room and like have conversations like, you all right, girl? I don't know. I'm not all right today, but it's going to be all right, right? Yeah, right. So it was kind of like a lot of that happening. And like the older I've gotten, the more it's kind of like bottled up a lot. And I've like thought about therapy, and I'm like, I don't come from a household that thinks about therapy in a positive way. Not that we've ever sat down, it's like, you can't go to therapy because they're going to think you crazy, but like we kind of label crazy people as crazy. And I'm like, I don't know, I've never felt comfortable with kind of going to do that. I've been thinking about it. I acknowledge my bullshit, but I haven't done anything about it yet.
I've like tried therapy, and for me personally, it's not my best tool of usefulness, but I'm similar to you, Ashley. I isolate, I shell. I kind of like, it's kind of like a numbing effect. If I'm dealing with something, I just, because most of the things I deal with are passed on traumas, I guess. Like I have a terrible case of the empathies. So not all of my like some things are genuine things that are happening to me, but a lot of the things are like an accumulation of other people being like, hey, I'm going through this, I'm going through this, I'm going through that. So my response is to be like, I need to be by myself and just like deal with this stuff so I can be more open to return and like be that person if I need to be in those roles. But in that way, that's where therapy was useful, where it's like, oh, I'm talking to you, but you're not taking anything from me. You're not like, oh, like talk to me so that I can talk to you. You're just listening. Like, I think it's useful. It was useful for big traumas, like when my grandmother passed, or transitioning from deciding that I didn't want to go to med school, like big things that I felt like I don't think it's intentional. I think relationships are transactionary, I guess, to a certain extent, and inherently so. But therapy, it's like a neutral person who doesn't really, like, yes, you're paying them, but they're not biased. They're not like, oh, I have any kind of self-interest in what I'm telling you to do. I have any kind of like personal jealousies or personal, just like any kind of personal investment in what you do in your life. Whether you succeed or fail, it doesn't directly impact this person. Whether you're like, I want to move to Australia or not, it doesn't affect that person. So I think that was the positive thing with that. Like, it's not my go-to all the time because it just doesn't work. I'm like, I have nothing to tell you, lady. But if it's big traumas that I genuinely feel like I can't process in any other way, it's a go-to.
So I guess with that in mind, how does your family regard mental health? Like, is that a conversation that you're having?
In terms of, so my family, I think prayer, meditation, all that stuff is part of mental health. Like, I remember like my mom being like, which people don't really think about it that way, but being like, oh, when you pray, like, oh, like God, if you believe in that, like already knows what you're thinking. So it's okay to be like, I feel this way, whether there's anything that exists out there or not. I think that is a form of coping with mental issues, to be able to be like, I have somewhere where I can like say things and like exactly as they are in my head and process them that way. I don't think my family's a culture where you just say how you feel exactly the way it is. I think you have to find ways to say it, but I'm thinking back to even growing up, even though it was a strict household, I felt comfortable. Like being like, hey, like this is what I'm going through. I've never really been to my parents like, oh, hey, what about therapy? But I've suggested it to family members. I've suggested it to at least one of my parents at any point. Like when my mom's mom passed, I was like, hey, like, do you want to talk to someone like neutral? Because of, you don't have a role there. Like, you're not a mother or a wife. You don't have to feel like, hey, like, oh, I'm supposed to be the strong mother or I'm supposed to be the strong wife. Like, you are just a person there. And like that, I personally haven't experienced any stigma. I know that's not necessarily, I guess, average, but I haven't experienced stigma in terms of that. Even if it's like, oh, talk to a pastor or whatever it is, but I haven't experienced any stigma in terms of finding outside help. Yeah.
I feel like it's like still looked at as like juju in my family. Even like my parents, for example, who come from very like religious backgrounds and they're like part-time Christians.
Hey.
They're like Christians out of convenience. But I think the way that they look at therapy, they find it like really unnecessary. Like I know particularly like my father, bless his heart, he's like, I don't understand why y'all so sad. When I was your age, I didn't get sad. Why you be getting sad for? You alive? You breathing? I banished the sadness. I'm like, okay. Like he really looks at it as like a waste of time and a waste of money. Like, why would you go spend money to go talk to? Why are you talking to a stranger about like things that are going on in your head? It's like, one, you're not really allowed to say that anything is off with you at all, and also you're kind of looked at, you know, dubiously for deciding that you want to go like involve a stranger in like the intimate workings of your mind. I mean, my mom knows that I've like been to therapy, and I've like screamed at one of my brothers enough times to like go to therapy. So I think we found help in it, even though I probably didn't go for as long as I should have. Again, just the fact that I could just be a person there and they didn't know anything about me, anything that I did say, unless it was something like really off the wall. They weren't going to like judge me for it. I could literally just sit there and talk, or I could sit there and say nothing, and that would be okay too. They wouldn't be like, why are you, you know, in a catatonic state? Why are you sitting there, you know, so quiet, not saying anything? If you do that, like in my family, or like isolate yourself, people won't really give you that space to be reclusive if that's what you need in order to like heal or cope. It's kind of like you can't win, so you have to be like putting on a happy face all the time in my family.
Yeah. I think it's a like interesting thing in my family. Like my family does come from like a medical like background, so there was like an acceptance towards like, you should go talk to someone. I know my grandmother has talked to someone, and I know even in raising her children, she like wanted to have them all in therapy at one point. So there is like a welcoming of it in certain levels. But I will say that the mentality of like, there also is this like real mentality of like, pick up and go. Like you should be able to pick up and keep going. And I think, you know, personally, because me and my mom's relationship is like so significant, like for me at least, is that like, you know, I always felt like there was a fear of like me being like weak, or like because I like needed somebody to talk to, like, you know, it was seen as a weak thing. And she didn't, I feel like my mom so badly just doesn't want anything to be wrong. And I think like it's changed in later years. In recent years, it's kind of changed. Like, you know, she definitely gives me that space to be a bit more human. But like early on, and like maybe a couple years ago, it's just like, nothing's wrong with you. Why do you need to go talk to somebody? Why do you need to do all these things? You know, and it's because she didn't, you know, we have like a dissociation in terms of like how she handles things, which they always have to pick up and go. And then the way I'm like handling things and like needing to talk to somebody or wanting to talk to somebody, or at least have that space and not feel like weak because of it, or feel like there's something wrong just because I'm feeling this way and I want to talk about it with someone. I understand like this is not the place to always be, but sometimes, you know, it helps to like have somebody to talk to, because otherwise you just keep to yourself.
And it's like I don't know, it's kind of like going from point A to point B. It's like, yes, you could walk there, but if you could get an Uber there for free, why would you want to walk? Like, that's how I look at therapy. Like, you're going to get through it probably in some way, because our brains have ways of helping us cope. But if you can find situations or spaces that help you to get there faster or get there with less pain, it's like, why wouldn't you? Like, I think maybe that's why, like, for me, it's like with big traumas, I'm like, with small things, I know that I can deal with them. But with big things, I'm like, why would I go through 4 years of like my subconscious lying to myself about what's actually happening and me thinking I'm over something that I'm not over and blah, 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 if I can just go and have a couple sessions. Like, it's never like, oh, I go for like 2 or 3 sessions just so I can identify what the actual issue is. Like, oh, I'm not over this part and that part. Then I'm like, all right, we can go. But that could have taken me 3 years because I'm just not in that space. And like, I don't know, but it doesn't work for everyone. I think they're different. There are things that are therapy that we don't label as therapy. Like having a comfortable person you can talk to, having someone who gives you space to do whatever you need to do to feel like Tiff was saying, to feel like you're in a healing space. Like if you can journal and you feel like no one's gonna read my journal or whatever, like that is therapy. Like if you can sing and dance and laugh, whatever, all those things can be forms of therapy. I think therapy has been limited to like going to talk to someone, and that's not
like
for
sitting
everybody.
on
That's
someone's
true.
couch
Yeah.
and like
Or
a
even
dimly
like
lit
therapeutic art therapy, like painting, drawing, like having
Like, it's
15.
not for everybody. Like not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah,
So.
you may not have to go sit and talk to a total stranger. Maybe you can go paint in a room with some other people who have like similar issues that you had. That you can just sometimes just like feeling like there are other people who might know a little bit about like what you're going through can be just as like helpful instead of like having to sit and like talk it out. Sometimes that's really draining for certain personalities.
Yeah,
So.
that's true.
I agree. I know I just kind of came out of nowhere, but no, like in my family, I don't know, like coming like from a young age, like my grandma passed away, so that was something that happened, and I was like what, maybe 6, 7 years old, and of course I'm like, who's thinking about therapy for a 6 or 7 year old? Nobody's thinking about that for a 6 or 7 year old. Mom probably needed it, and dad probably needed it, but nobody's thinking about that for a child. And then maybe 3, 4, 5 years later, that's when my dad passed away. So it's like in that time, I think we ended up kind of closing in on one another. So like it was more of a family healing process than it was anything that we kind of looked outward towards. And it was like my mom had to keep going. She had to keep moving. She had to keep pushing because she had 2 kids. They were really young, and it was just about making it to the next day. And not, if you let yourself sit down and wallow in that kind of stuff, you're not going to be able to make it through. So that kind of trauma at a young age is kind of creeping up on me now that I'm like realizing, oh wait, I am very sad. And I did not know that for the last like several years of my life. And now it's like weighing on me, and like any other like emotional traumas that I've gone through, I'm like sitting with it now. So it's like, I don't know. That's why I'm like, it's all happening all of a sudden. And I don't know where it's actually coming from. But I don't know if that was something that was ever really discussed in my family. Like, I know that my brother had gone to therapy probably around that time that my dad passed away, and he like sat in the room with the therapist and didn't say anything. And I don't know if it was because he felt like it was him being fragile, or it was just too vulnerable of a space for him, but he didn't respond to it well, and he stopped going. But I was never, given the opportunity to talk to anybody, and it was never something that I even thought about. So I kind of, again, like closed in on myself. So why is there a stigma in the Black community in regards to mental health? Like, why is that an issue?
I feel like in the community that I am familiar with, it's the idea of you should be praying to God so he can fix it. Like, why are you sitting there thinking that, you know what I mean? Like, I think that significantly builds on that stigma of like, oh, you're not trusting enough. You don't have enough faith. And it's like, no, we're human. Like, whether you believe in like any extraterrestrial or spiritual beings out there, we are human here right now. And some of the experiences we have to process them in the state that we're in. And I feel like that is a disservice to everybody, that like those issues are not dealt with. So like in my world, that was like the main stigmas, not from I wouldn't say from my parents directly, but from everybody else around. When issues came up, it was just like, oh, pray about it and like whatever. And it's like, can we process this? Like, can this person be allowed to grieve? Like, I've witnessed like my cousin, who I'm not close to right now, but when she lost her dad, like people were like, oh, you can't question God. I'm like, no, like she has the right to ask questions. Like she has the right to feel how she's feeling. Right? Can she feel that? Like, can there be room made for that experience? And like, yeah. So I think that's where I've seen stigma stem from.
It's actually kind of funny that you said that in regards to religion. There's an article on Huffington Post that is talking about mental health. May was Mental Health Awareness Month, and how like it is a taboo in the Black community, and the tagline is just pray about it. And it's like, how is prayer going to help someone who actually may have something wrong with them? They may have been diagnosed with something, and the way that they are viewed within the community, like how that can kind of add extra trauma to that situation. If you're, oh, I have bipolar disorder, the way that people in your family or your community might view you at that point. And one of the things that the article says is, I can't expect other people in my community to talk about mental health unless I am willing to share my own story and how it impacts me daily. And we don't actually talk about that in the day-to-day conversations with our family and friends. It's like, well, it happens. You might be crazy. And it's kind of just relegated to that.
I think within friends... Go ahead, Ashley.
I was just going to say, I think it's hard because like mental health can sometimes be seen as something that's not real, because it's like it's not like when you get like scarred or like injured, people don't think the chemical imbalances actually like mean something, like, or that like, you know, you can actually have a disorder or a mood disorder that's like legitimate, like so I think like even being able to put like names to like certain things is really like helpful, having that terminology. And often in the Black community, like we're the last ones to be on the receiving end of that like information anyway, and then to even like accept it as like, this is a legitimate thing and I can't see it, what she said, like she depressed, like nobody like that doesn't seem like real because you can't like formulate it in some way. So I think it makes it hard for people to actually get help when they really need it.
I think on the hierarchies of traumas that like any kinds of ancestors or whoever has faced, like I'm sure my grandmother faced a lot of things. Like she raised 8 kids by herself. Her husband was off doing whatever the fuck he was doing. And it's like, who checked for her mental health? So I think it's that thing where it's like, oh, if she could endure that, you should. But it goes back to the whole Uber walking analogy. Like, yeah, you could stuff it down if you have to. You could go through it. But I think moving up on the quote unquote Maslow hierarchy of needs, like we're getting to a place where we have finally that space to have time to be like, oh, I live by myself. Probably, I think I am though. Like the most of us here, like the first in our families to live alone, to have the time to sit there and be like, oh, by myself with no responsibilities, with no thought of like anyone else, what is happening with me? And with that comes the surfacing of those traumas. Like comes the surfacing of those things that like people before us never had a breath of time to like
really be like,
sit there and think about.
That's
because
just
they
like
were-
in terms of time and just like being
I feel
able,
like I wonder if like maybe some of the like offhanded comments or something that comes from family members maybe stems from a place, I don't want to say jealousy, but kind of maybe again, well, if I had to, you know,
Suffer
go
through
through,
this.
if I had to suffer and
dare
go
you.
through all these traumas without any kind of like outside intervention, and you know, and I'm technically okay, you know, why can't you be okay? And it's like, I mean, we have, you know, the resources and the means and probably not as many babies or as many mortgages right now to be able to explore something like art therapy or have the time to like sit and journal in the morning. And so I wonder if, you know, these things that they're saying doesn't come necessarily from a place of stigma or them thinking that it's not real, but maybe just, you know, I didn't get to do these things.
I think even added to that, just an underestimation of the need. Like, yes, jealousies, but also just like an underestimation of the, because your brain can suppress shit like crazy,
I
like
attest to
crazy.
that.
So it's like, you're like, Mom, I am facing this, but you have faced this probably at a higher level than I am. I just have time to think about it. And it's like, they're like, I don't have time to sit there and think of, they're like, what? Can you go out there
Nope,
and get you a
suppression skills
career?
from
You're
81.
sitting there trying to figure out things like that. That's how I am my age. I had already done blah because I wasn't sitting out here trying to, and it's like, we want different things. Like, I want peace in my head. You wanted a mortgage and kids. And it's like, I think that too, like,
that definitely airs on like a conversation that I legit had with my mom last night. I was trying to talk to her about like how I felt like lonely or felt alone, and she was and I was trying to explain it's so funny because I was trying to explain it to her, and my mom, the same running tape is that like, it's okay to feel that way, it's okay to feel that way, but you can't let that affect you. You got to keep moving on, you got to keep moving on, you got to keep going, you got to keep on, which is like perfect, like
the
advice.
strong Black woman
It's-
trope.
Yeah, but it was perfect. I mean, and I know that, and I know there's a little fear in her because she's afraid that I'm like a wallower and like I just sit in it all the time. And so I was trying to get her to understand that, like, look, I understand your concern, but I'm asking you like for advice or just like how to deal with this feeling. And I tried to preface it with like, look, we don't really talk like that. Like, I don't really come to you in these instances, and I don't want you to view me as weak, because that's the perceiving view, is that like, you know, if you shouldn't be worried about no boy, you shouldn't be crying over some boy, you know, processing some break, basically, you know, and so she got really defensive, you know, she got defensive and like, well, you perceiving me to be this way, to think that I'm going to think that you're weak. I'm not, I was trying to tell her, Mom, don't get defensive. I'm just saying, in the past, I've come to you before, and there have been things that you've said that have aired on that tone. So just try to hear me out. And it took a minute, but we did talk. We ended up talking. Like I asked her about like how she deals with her like loneliness, because my mom, I don't, you know, so like, you know, she talked about getting a pet at one point, and I was like, one of my coworkers suggested I get like a hamster, and it was just like, it was what she could give at the moment, and it was enough. Like that was enough, you know. So yeah.
It's like, yeah. And we have safety nets where like before, if like they took time to think about, oh, I'm lonely, they might be working one less job, not be able to take care of kid. I'm like, if I think about, oh, I'm lonely, like there's no little, yeah, exactly. I'm like, I have options for that. Like, it's not as traumatic of like, oh no, the dead end of lonely. Like, it's like, oh, I have social media. So it's like we're experiencing things that they didn't have the luxury to experience to a certain extent. I'm like, I respect the strength that it has taken people before to go through whatever they went through. But I think it's also respectable that we are being self-aware, that we are like, okay, like I really want to understand who I'm about, not just the facades that I need to put up to go through life, but like for real, like what's going on in my head, what's happening, and I want to be accountable for that. I think that's that's not weakness, that is strength. Like it's like, yeah, that's a lot to face in your 20s.
Like, I recently had a conversation with my mom. I was driving to work. We usually have, like, our morning conversations when I'm driving to work, and then our evening conversations when I'm driving home from work, and that's where we get a lot of our talking. And as I'm driving to work, I was talking to her. It wasn't necessarily about mental health. It was about actually jobs. And I was like, I hate my job, and every time I go in there, I dread it, and it's like I feel like physically ill sometimes, and it's just like, you know, all this stress. And she's like, you know, you guys are kind of just like built differently from us. Like back in the day, I'm like, how did you guys suffer through that kind of stuff? She's like, we were built differently than you. Like we had to go through a lot more trauma, but we knew that if we did not, we would not be able to feed our children and like clothe them and like take care of them. And I'm like, we do have the luxury now to kind of sit back and like think about it, and like we don't have babies as soon, and you know, we actually don't give a shit about our jobs low key, because we know we can go find another one even if it's not something that we want, because we probably wasn't working a job we liked any fucking way. So I mean, I kind of took it as a negative, because I'm like, wait, we not weak.
Yeah,
we strong.
Yeah.
It's just in a different way. And like that was what she could offer me, like her perspective. And again, like I said, if she had just been like, you know what, I'm gonna sit here and cry, me and my brother probably wouldn't have made it to college. So
yeah, sure. Yeah.
I don't know. We gotta like wipe the sweat off your brow a little bit, keep it pushing.
And I feel like life comes a different. Like it's calm when you do have those moments of calm. That's the time to process things, because right before you blink your eyes, there's another thing that could be traumatic that you have to deal with. And it's kind of like when you have those moments where you can go talk to someone and you feel like you have the ability to process your thoughts enough to talk, or you can journal, or you can do whatever you need to do. Take that moment, because life be like actually like. And it's like, I don't know, finding those spaces of like, all right, I can talk right now. Yay. Like, let's process the other shit before something else happens.
I will also like err on the sense of like emotional honesty, and like getting to like, it's hard. Like, it's been hard for me, because, you know, there's that automatic people ask you how you're doing, and you're like, I'm good. I'm good.
Right.
I'm fine. And then like, the longer you tell yourself that, the more you dissociate. And you like, for me, like, it's taken me, like, I even did it the other day. I was like, oh, I'm good. And I was like, wait a minute. Let me think about that.
I'm actually not well.
I'm working through things. And it's just trying to be honest with myself about how I'm actually feeling. Yeah. That's hard, because I feel like for a long time I've built up this, like, let's smile and get through the day. And it helps. But then I wonder why I'm, like, bursting out into tears in another instance. Right. So it's trying to have that emotional honesty with yourself. And that's why I, like, probably journal so much the way I do, because I get to like reevaluate and go back and be like, this is how you were actually feeling. Like, so that's a hard awareness to develop, and it takes some time, because we've already formulated so many coping mechanisms within ourselves to like just get through the day. yeah, that's, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, but kind of
harmful, yeah.
along that line, though, I think we need to have emotional honesty everywhere.
Yeah.
Because again, you're at work and you got to smile, even though you're not happy. And they're like, well, don't bring your sads to work. And it's like, but I'm sad, even though I'm here, because I spend most of my time here. So I'm just supposed to forget how I feel here for the like next 8 hours or so that I'm working for you. And it's like, that's not realistic. Or you're having a conversation with somebody and they're like, how are you? And you're like, I'm all right, but you're not really all right, because you know they really don't want to hear the real answer, because if you told them the real answer, they would probably be afraid. But like, actually, I think about sad things all the time, and I think about blowing this building up every day. And they're like, oh my, I did not mean to ask you this, and I did not need to know that. So,
Or they might just be going through their own shit, and they're like, oh my God, my thoughts are already scary. You have scary thoughts too.
Let's
I
have
don't want to
scary
hear, but
thoughts
I can't.
together.
I can't. Like, somebody might be like, you know, my own shit scares me enough. So the risk of having to like internalize other people's like things can be too much for some people.
it's funny. I was at work, and because I'm in HR, I have to like halfway help run new hire orientation, and we play this game called the life course game, which is like I know, right? Which is like the game of life, but with the actual bullshit that happens in life. So you're like playing the game and like throwing the dice and all this mess, and you're like going around the board, and you'll hit a spot and it'll be like, your neighborhood didn't have sidewalks, so you fell and like broke your knee, and now you can't go to work and provide for your family. Go back 2 spaces. And then if you hit back 2 spaces, that might be a spot where you got to pick up a red card, and you pick up the red card and it's like, you was having underage, sex and drinking, and then you gotta go back 3 spaces, and you might end up going back and forth from negative to positive. And the one thing that I remember saying at the end of it, as we were kind of like wrapping up and like talking about, well, what did you take from this experience? And I'm like, the fact that people go through things on a day-to-day basis and they don't wear it on their faces or their sleeves, and you have to be aware of that empathy. And like, you can take a lot from realizing that people are struggling just like you, even though you don't realize it.
And I think that can be a form of therapy, which sounds weird, but like
It can be.
talking to someone when you are going through, I mean, this is coming from an avoider, so I don't know how valid this is. But like, if I'm going through something and I talk to someone and they're going through something, and I can easily see how they can get through what they're going through, then I'm like, oh, I too can probably get through what I feel like is impossible right now. Because like, I often, like, if I'm talking to someone and they're like, oh, I'm in this situation, it's so shitty, it's so terrible, I'm like, but you're so smart, shut up. Like, it's fun. Like that, then I'm like, oh, like, look at how much hope I have for this person. That can apply to my situation too. Like, I'm like, oh, like, I can probably do this. So I think just that like shifted perspective where it's like, oh, the world is falling apart, but actually it's really not. Like, it's really not. Like, things are okay. Like, we can move forward. Like, we can take 3 steps back, but we can always take 2 steps forward or whatever, and things can turn around. And I guess that goes into like friendships as therapy, or like relationships as therapy, like having people that you can really, who force you to say how you're really feeling, who can really be like, you said you were right, but I'm gonna tell them in your face.
I think having people in your life who like reaffirm that something isn't making you feel okay. Like, I think we have a tendency to like swat down, people's issues. If someone's like, Tuesdays make me sad, I just get sad every Tuesday. Instead of somebody being like, well, tomorrow Wednesday, so I don't know, like, you're gonna be fine. Like, like, instead of someone being like that, being like, okay, Tuesdays could be a little sad. Like, that's very valid. Like, sometimes I think now in the culture of mental health, we're getting a little closer, at least maybe amongst our friend groups, perhaps, or people like who have like similar life experiences as us. We're allowing it to be like valid to kind of feel the way we feel without being like, oh, well, I feel worse than you. But like, without always
competition.
without always trying to play like sadness Olympics. I think we're doing a little better at like being like, the way that you feel is very valid, even if your leg not falling off and your cat didn't die. The fact that you get sad on Tuesdays is still valid, and it's still a thing that affects you. So let me hear about that thing. That thing is important to you. Even if, Tuesdays don't make me sad, doesn't mean Tuesday's not a sad day for you.
Yeah. Right. I think that like a firm self in general, like I know my friendships have been very therapeutic for me. My relationships have been therapeutic. So some of them have led to a lot of trauma, but they've been therapeutic. Exactly. Everybody on this podcast knows. Like, I feel like having people who are like, hey, like, you feel this, like, how do you really feel? Like, oh, I know you like to say everything's okay because, like, I do the same thing. But how do you really feel about the situation? Or, like, oh, I know this made you feel this way, and that's valid, and I still love you, and, like, I understand that what I did, you know, probably made you feel this terrible way, even though I wouldn't have felt the same way. It's important to have those spaces that feel safe to you, whether it's a therapist or a person or, like, whatever it is.
Yeah, I was gonna err on, like, I think it's also important to kind of like rationalize or think logically about, like, those relationships, because oftentimes we can fill ourselves with, like, fantasies about, like, how we think people will react, especially people who are close to you. And, like, so one thing I was talking to, like, a friend the other day about, like, you know, how she, like, deals with her, like, depression, and she's, like, a big isolator too, because she's like, it's still hard for me to, like, even the people who are close to me, it's still hard for me to, like, reach out and, like, be like, I need to talk about something. So one thing she said she does when she's not, like, in that mode or not in depression is she lets people know, here are the telltale signs. If you haven't heard from me, that's probably, like, check on me, please. Like she, like, you know, she tries to let that be known, because oftentimes there's that, like, emotional honesty game that you're playing with yourself about, like, oh yeah, I'm fine. And you try to put that up for everybody else. And some people may not know that, like, you know, this is, some people may look at you and just see you as being fine. So you have to, like, when you're not in those moments, or when you're in a more open space or you feel safe, to, like, let people know, like, this is what's happening when I'm, like, not this way. And that's something I have to start doing more often, that I realize, because you have walls up with everybody, even no matter how close you are or how not close you are. So it's something to work on. It's something to think about, especially if you find yourself knowing, like, logically you have people, but then, like, not being able to, like, I guess, be proactive about stepping out of it and, like, reaching out.
So funny that you should say that. We kind of, like, touched on it a little bit, but I kind of want to circle back to it. How does social media impact your mental health in a good or bad way?
Social media is garbage.
Why do you say that, boo?
Because it's a culture of triggering. Like, literally logging in to everything, to, like, every app, every website. Like, there's so much, I think, that just is bad. Like, there's so much bad news. Like, think about Facebook necessarily. Like, I find that a lot of the time that I need to, like, detox digitally. I mean, think about, like, when all the, like, waves of, like, police brutality was happening. Yeah. I mean, you know, 10 years ago, you would have never seen live video, of like, atrocities. Yeah. Happening, and it's like you see that, like, every day, or you have people who are just, like, completely open, like, my boyfriend trash, my life trash, my legs falling off. Like, we're very much into sharing, and it's great that, you know, we're able to have the kinds of, like, conversations and to be fed the kind of information, but a lot of the time it's too much to, like, internalize, and just, like, you just trying to, like, check the weather, and now you got fat. It's literally things like that. And if you are someone who's, like, empathic, or someone who feels a lot, you will find that just, like, general, like, life happenings that have nothing to do with you will suddenly really take a toll on, like, how you feel mentally. That, or, like, seeing other people, like, live their life and watching other people's highlight reels. You know, you're assuming that Susie Q has an amazing life, and you compare yourself a lot. And you're like, well, my life is trash. Like, everybody on my social media got, like, 3 houses, 5 dogs, 2 boyfriends, and I don't have nothing, and now I done got fed. Like,
that's, like, funny that you mentioned that article that I was talking about earlier. The number 1 stressor was, like, career stuff. So apparently, like, 67% of millennials are, like, stressed about careers. Number 2, at 50-something%, was comparing ourselves to people our age, specifically people who are not close to us. Like, because I assume because you know what's happening with people who are close to you, so you're like, yeah, I should have did this, but I shouldn't. Like, but people who, like, are not close to us, we have access to that stuff. To their 3 houses and 2 boyfriends, and, like, and number 3 was relationships, which is kind of lets you know where our comparison levels are. And I think social media has a huge part of that, where, like, people, I don't know, for mental health, sitting there and thinking that your social media is you. I think that is an actual mental health crisis for millennials. That idea that like who you are on social media and who you are as a person are not the same. Like you having a certain number. I was having this conversation with my brother, like, oh, how there's some people whose content is so like impactful, but they have less followers, but society's like, oh, so your information must not be important. And it's like, is this who we are now? Like, let's come from a Black Mirror episode where like that was a thing. Like it was some dystopian society where like now every time you meet someone you see exactly what their social media ranking is, and it's like, is that who we are now? Like that can be really triggering. I feel like people can feel invalidated without, if like likes don't happen or whatever the hell doesn't happen in their social media life, they directly link that to like, oh, so me as a person, I must not be blah blah blah
important,
and I must not, right, important.
People like me on Instagram, so they don't like me in real life.
Basically, or
like,
vice
you know, you only
versa.
got 10 friends in real life. Why do you think you gonna get 100 likes on Instagram?
Yeah, but or vice versa. Like just because people like you on social media doesn't mean you are
that
not
you
a
got real
trash
friends.
human, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you have real friends or that you don't have things you need to work on. And like I think that impacts mental health in a really strong way in terms of self-perception.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree with that. I don't know. Like even with like dating apps and stuff, like we've become so like, you ugly swipe. Oh, you cute. Yes. Oh, you ugly swipe. And it's like we've just like turned each other's into commodity. Like we're just like a face. And we're not people. And it's like in real life, if you saw somebody that maybe you're not completely attracted to, but they funny, you like, all right, I can talk to you. That's cool. But you see him on Tinder, you're like, oh, he ugly as hell. I'm not talking to him. I don't want to get to know you. You probably got ugly parents. Like your parents are ugly. Like
And
your
that can
parents
be
ugly.
triggering. Like
And
I
that
had
can
a
be
friend,
triggering.
like a guy friend who was like, hey, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like no one's matching with me. Like legit small crisis over like I'm on dating.
Tinder.
Yeah, like I'm like, it's
Like Tinder is the measure of your worth.
no. Like
Don't you let these dating apps fool you.
Yeah,
I mean, you ugly, but somebody gonna love you anyway. It don't gotta be from the internet.
oh yeah. Yeah, like I don't know, like I feel like social media for me like used to be like a source of anxiety because like there was pressure to feel like I needed to be on it, and then like because it seems like if it didn't happen, if it happened, if it's not on social media, it didn't happen, and like
Right.
I feel like that it's interesting because I think it can be useful in some aspects, you know, and in sort of like expressing yourself and putting part of yourself out there, it can be a very useful thing, but you know, I don't know. I used to like really like flame out just because I was like, I gotta get onto this and like use it like a weird grandma who like needs it. But like I don't know because there's like, even when you talk to people and they're like, oh, what's your Facebook? What's your Instagram? Like that's something that people want to know regardless of whether it's like a business or marketing thing. So it's an interesting thing that like I kind of toy back and forth with because like I'm like, I know this is like a good thing and I would like to be like better at using it, but at the same time I just like, oh.
it can also be good
Yeah,
though. Like I
yeah.
think about people like Alexel, Yoga Rachel,
Yeah.
that I wouldn't know if I wasn't
There's
on
a-
Instagram, or like ways that being free to express myself, particularly on Instagram. I fucking love Instagram. Like ways of expressing myself on Instagram that have led to a self-expression in real life, where like I'm like, oh, this is a thought that I have no one to talk to about it right now, but I'm gonna put a post and like write about it that have led to more openness in real life. I think it's triggering, but there are ways that it can be a source of healing depending who you're connected to and like how you are choosing to experience yourself within that context.
I think image control is like an important thing too. Because
Yeah.
a lot of times I feel like something's happening with like you want to control your image in the way you're seen, and I think social media
Gives you that.
lends itself to it. And I don't know whether that's like a good or bad thing, but
Be a
like,
mirror to what you
yeah,
aspire to.
yeah.
You can be like, oh, like, I don't know. I like this about this person. What do I like about it? This is a mirror to kind of what I'm aspiring to as a person. I just learned something about myself. Like, So
just unfollow and block everybody.
that too. I do that too. If it's triggering,
If you find that there's just no goodness cultivating in your feed, you can block people. You can unfollow.
just
I
unfollow
block people
them.
all the time.
Same.
You can
Like,
hide
boyfriends.
posts. You can hide posts.
even people I like, I'm like, if the things that they're posting are not leading to positive feelings, I'm like, I love you, but
Like,
unfollow.
you always on Facebook talking about how you don't like women. I'm a block. I'm a delete you. I'm a burn your Facebook account down. Nope, not trying to hear that. Nope.
Like, so you have some control over how social media.
Yeah.
You do. You do. So how do romantic relationships factor into mental health? Is that a different topic? Is that like a topic going or something?
Oh God.
This is a serious topic.
Like I had to shut Facebook
what
last
about-
night.
What phase of them?
Yeah, what about it?
Well, after you break up?
What
phase
aspect of the
them?
mental?
Yeah.
Like how do you think that it factors into your health on a day-to-day basis, like your romantic interactions?
That's why I don't
I-
go on
It gives
it.
me anxiety.
Because if I
Okay.
see his face on there, I'll be like, oh my God, he living. Like
He alive, he living, he doing
living.
things. How
He's
dare
not
he?
talking to me. He's talking to everybody else. I'm like, no.
I feel
No.
like, I don't know, currently, we got to time frame it. Currently, I feel like it's very it's supportive. My current partner is like, hey, this is how you feel. Tell me exactly how it is in your brain. And it used to be jarring for me, but it's helping me to be more expressive in my other relationships. Because he's like, I feel like you have some subconscious belief that if you say your negative feelings as the way they are, that won't be acceptable. And that's something I didn't think about before he mentioned it. So it's like having that person who spends that much time with you, they have insight to certain things about you that like other people might not. And like for me so far, like I found that to be a positive thing. Like that he can be like, hey, what's happening? Like just tell me exactly the way it is, and then we can discuss the feelings that ensue afterwards. And that has been like really liberating, like whether this goes on or not. Like that's something that I feel like I'm going to carry forever, just that idea of like feeling free to like feeling loved regardless. Like, oh, you can say this, you can say that, and that's valid. In the past, I think breakups have been very traumatic for me.
Of course they are.
Which serious, like which also the human it is. I think it'd be very traumatic to have that bond with someone and then like it just like goes to shit.
I mean, I know that for me personally, like now in my relationship, like very heavy on in the beginning, we had a lot of like support for one another, and it was kind of like having a sounding board, somebody that wasn't in the middle of like maybe the other situations that were going on in my life. And it kind of was like a relief factor because it was like having a therapist. They were like, I can tell you stuff and it doesn't really affect you because it's about everybody else. And I don't like everybody else right now. And I like you and you're very hopeful. Thank you for being there. Thank you for being a friend. And like now that we've spent, because we live together, so it's like interesting to still have someone like watching you and kind of like knowing how you feel about things and still feeling uncomfortable when it's like happening. Like I'm like going to randomly cry about something right now. Why are you looking at me? And it's like, yeah, you know, I've seen you for the last week or two you've been very sad, and I know it's because of your dad and because of this and that and the third. And I'm like, wait, you was looking at
in my
me?
head.
You was watching me? Somebody was watching me, and I don't know how I feel about this. It's making me uncomfortable. So there's definitely a different level. Now, previously, like Fimba has said, when there's like people who you're just like dating or just like having sex with, or you just like talking to, they don't give a damn about your mental health, and they are there to fuck it up. Fuck it up.
I feel like sometimes it's not intentional, but it's like
They don't care.
I think the lack of like caring, especially when it's reciprocated, where it's like, you know, I don't care about you and you don't care about me. That's like can be very eroding to like your self identity. And like, not saying that relationships necessarily fix that. I think healthy connections with people in general, whether it's friendships or like healthy casual relationships or whatever you need, just those safe spaces where you can be like, this is how I feel and it's acceptable, can be like healing to that.
I think one thing I'm like learning is that like with those intimate relationships, like there is that like level of intimacy where that person can like read your face, and then they're like, you can't really hide anything from them. And if I think it's like, now that I'm not in that type of like relationship where this person knows my history, knows a lot about me, it's interesting to kind of like level up, like, who are the people who like know me so well that like can look at my face and be like, Ashley, you can't hide anything from me, versus like the people who can't. And in that instance, I've kind of like realized, well, I need to do more work in terms of like opening up, because there's people who just know because your mom and your family know because you live with them, and like you can't do anything about that. And then there's people who like, where you have evolved and grown and you've been around them like constantly, where they've just learned those things about you. And so it's interesting to kind of realize, okay, there's work I need to do in this relationship. There's work I need to do in this relationship. I need to like nurture this a little bit more. So, you know, like, you know, I can communicate that well, and so they can know. Because I realize in some instances that I've kind of I haven't done so well in that. Which is not a good or bad thing. It's also a learning process.
Yeah.
And
it's also who you're interacting with.
Yes.
Like feeling that reception. Like I feel like sometimes you want to open. I don't know what it is about romantic relationships specifically, but like sometimes you want to open up, but there are other dynamics going on. It's like, I don't know, like jealousies or like drama or whatever. Whereas the romantic partner, you are like, we're arguing, but it's going to end up most of the time,
you know,
with us resolving it. Like you feel that security.
You know,
whereas with other people, you're like, I don't even know what's at play right now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the rules. Like I don't know if you're telling me this because you care about me or because you're still upset of
and
or because you don't want me to do this.
Spiraling.
Because
I never know what's at play in my romantic.
Oh Lord.
No, I feel like I've always found, not always, but kind of. I feel like as a result of like my romantic interactions, I think now I'm at the place where I'm learning to not diminish like my mental health because I'm invested in someone else's.
Amen.
I'm gonna say that one more again. I think that what I've learned is to not diminish my mental health because of my investment in someone else's. I've always found that I've been more receptive to someone else. Letting no. I've always been more receptive to someone like pouring all of their like sadness and like mental disruption into me versus the other way around. When someone is like, what is on your mind or what are you thinking about? That question gives me anxiety because I'm like, oh no, they can see. They trying to see in here. I don't want them to.
Lock it up.
So I will always like turn the conversation back on them. I really don't like answering questions like about my mental health or about like my emotions, but I also know that I like keep a lot of things in and tend to kind of have so many questions that they like literally will bubble over into like my ability to function like normally in daily life. And I think thus far all of my romantic relationships have been me investing in their mental health instead of my own. Gotta stop that.
Man, it's kind of heavy. Thank you for that tip.
I get like that.
Kind of heavy, but it's okay. So let's kind of transition a little bit into our Get Your Mind Right segment. And Ashley has volunteered as tribute. Ashley, tell us about yourself.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Ashley. No. Am I talking about an experience specifically?
Give us an experience.
So in the instance, like, when I lost my grandmother in July, July 2016, I didn't really like, it took a while for that to like really like settle in. And I remember like the first night or the evening of that like happening, I like got very sarcastic. Like I remember I called up Bruce and I was like, yeah, this emergency room is very scary. Like I don't even know, why would they make it so dim in here? Like it should be way nicer. And that's just like, I think that's somehow like how I kind of like deal with like traumatic things like that. I get very sarcastic. But from that, like, I think it evolved in like a sort of self-discovery for me in terms of like becoming aware of like how I deal with things. And because of that, like I went to talk to somebody and good things did come out of that, like in terms of building like better habits for like dealing with my problems and being more open and realizing that, oh, hey, you cut people off sometimes, like you build up walls sometimes. these are certain things that like it becomes very overwhelming when you see these problems and you see all these issues, but you also realize like there are things that you can do about it. Like you can like, you know, go talk to somebody. You can try to like, you know, journal it out. Like you know that you're not like helpless in that regard. And so I guess yeah, like I guess there are ways to kind of like get out of these like issues in terms of dealing with them better. Maybe it's not that they don't always go away, but there are different ways that you can kind of like deal with them. If you want to, you have to like want to get better. I think that's like that desire of like not running that record of being like, I'm alone, I'm all by myself and I messed up. Like you can't spin that record. Like, so yeah. I wanted to say something about not judging how you feel, no matter how fucked up or weird it might like be.
Preach.
Be neutral and objective with your feelings, because if you have a thought, if you have a feeling, I'm not saying it always have some truth to it or not, but let it live. Like jot it down. You know, think about it too much or don't think about it too much, but don't judge it as good or bad, because I feel like oftentimes we do that, and you know it kind of leads to like nothing.
Yeah, you can't really heal if you're out here
Yeah.
prejudging yourself about stuff. So I definitely understand that.
Yeah.
Thank you for stepping up to the mic, my dear.
Getting our minds right.
Get your mind right. So this has been the Get Your Life Project. If you would like to follow us on any of our social medias, feel free. It is GETYLP. #GETYLP. And this has been the Get Your Life Project. So, in the words of our ancestors, friends,
How many of us have them?